Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today's upload is from a project I have been working on for about 6 months now. Before we get into it, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. The links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below, my merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe, click the like button, and please leave a comment. It really does help, and it does matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? So, for the last 6 months, I have been working on a project dedicated to Victor, an audiobook. I compiled experiences, hunts, emails that I have had during the contact with him. I have not spoken or heard from him or his family in a month, at least, maybe a little longer. I don't know what's going on with his family or him. I did text a while back, did not get a response. But I still chose to work on this audiobook, and I have it recorded and finished. I don't know what to do with it at this point. I guess I'll just hold on to it for a little while longer until I see fit to release it or whatnot. But through all of these emails, experiences, talks, there was one hunt that he had shared with us that I really, really enjoyed. And, he had shared his dad's LBL experience, Little America, Wyoming, San Leandro, a slew of others. But this one is the one that just, gave me chills. Let's get into it. While the pandemic was in full swing and national parks were closed down nationwide, so some cleanup work needed to be done before the start of the next time the public was allowed back in the parks, the one I got the most calls from was Cadiz Cove in the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. It's located in Tennessee and is on a 9-mile loop road. And it's not Bigfoot or werewolves or even Dogman they were asking for help with. You would never guess, but feral humans, except for the fact they dress like cave people. Our rangers of the Forest Service had engaged with them numerous occasions and not fared too well. So finally, I decided to take on one of the great mysteries of the national parks. It all started way back in 1968. Paul Kindle was making his final rounds to make sure everyone was out of the park. When he spotted 3 people at the back side of one of the fields, he whistled, got their attention, and motions for them to come his way, but instead they moved behind an old cabin on the hill. He then blows his horn on the service truck and watches as one sticks his head out from behind the building, and then he howls at them to come down. When the park is closed, it's time to leave. After 5 minutes of this, he thinks that they must not be from the country and don't understand what he's saying. So now he's trying to think how to explain to them and make them understand without making them mad. So as he bumps up the hill, getting closer, thinking, What way to start a weekend off, no help in the park but me, and rounds the corner. His eyes cannot believe what he's seeing. Two males are dressed in what look like animal fur, covering their male parts, and one female, with furs covering her bottom half. They were dirty and ragged looking, had a heavy forehead, thick lips, long hair. The two men were extremely hairy, and the woman only slightly less. He reached for his door handle. Then the rocks and spears start to rain down. His windshield broke, and he was hit with one of the rocks as it came over the top of his open door. He then retreated in the battered truck. After he was able to get it running and back down the hill, he fled in reverse, not looking where he was going. After reaching the main road again and being able to get on the radio and call for help, did he start to look back up the hill again and watch them calmly walk to the southwest and out of sight before darkness fell. He was left alone again till his supervisor finally showed up to get his statement and bring him for treatment. Fast forward, July 1973. The Hampshire family from upstate Pennsylvania is visiting for their first time. Father George, Mother Madeline, and their twins, Heather and Alice. They had already been around the loop twice today, but they were told this is the best place to see black bear. They've seen them around their home, but they wanted to see one here at the Great Smoky Mountains. So after a long lunch break, they all crossed their fingers and started their third trip down Loop Road. They had almost gone nowhere when Alice asked her dad why those four men were chasing that deer with spears and dressed in shorts. He immediately pulled over so he could look. He could not believe what he was seeing. There, no more than 125 yards in a pasture, was four cavemen, as he would report. He stated that he and his family had watched for 3 minutes as these cavemen chased this deer around the field until it finally ran off and left them standing in the middle of the field, at which time they noticed they were being watched and headed to the nearest large patch of trees. When they made the report, the ranger got on the radio and called for more rangers. When they arrived, they spoke where they could not be heard. Then all but one headed toward the area. They had shown the original ranger, who was still in charge, and then he directed them to move along the road and leave the park as soon as they got to the other side. He followed them all the way out. Let's move up to October of 75. The park is packed with visitors, with the leaves changing color. The whole loop road is backed up with traffic, and here comes the Cruz family from San Antonio, Texas. Jose Maria and her parents, Guillermo and Mary. The parents are both in their late 80s and are being brought to the Great Smokies for their first trip ever out of the state of Texas. The two men are riding in the front of the car while the women are in the back. Guillermo is a veteran of the Korean War and Vietnam War, serving 3 tours in Vietnam before getting wounded, and they would not let him return to combat duty. They had just passed the halfway point of the modern-day middle rest area when they topped a hill, and he asked Jose if that's what a hillbilly looks like. Jose says, "What?" and pulls over to see what his father-in-law is talking about. Unable to see what he is talking about, he gets out of his vehicle. His wife and mother see 2 figures walking away. They describe them as cave people, one man wearing a loincloth, the female with a loincloth. Both had heavy brow. The male was extremely hairy. Jose said they were both very thick. And then they were out of sight. Jose said he was not about to follow them. Now we'll jump to the winter of 2004. Snow is on the ground. A pair of rangers, Tim and Beth, decide to patrol the park and see if all is quiet. And after they open and lock the gate behind them, they know that the only people that they may see is a hiker on the Appalachian Trail, if any at all. After they slide down the steepest portion of Loop Road, they notice tracks along the side of the road. Beth says to Tim, "You need to look at these." Tim stops the truck and exits, walks around to have a look, and says in a kind of disbelieving voice, "Barefoot?" He then looks around for a moment, gets back in the truck, and calls it in. And his supervisor would like to know why, in the first place, they went in there. And now they need to lock their doors of the truck and drive straight out of there. And do not ask any questions and call when they are out. It took them 45 minutes to finish the rest of the loop in the snow. Beth jumped out and opened the gate. Tim drove through it, and her locking the gate behind them. Tim then called back in, and the supervisor told him to return to the ranger station. Once they were there, they walked inside. He wanted to talk to them one at a time, so Beth went first. He told her to write up her report in front of him. After that, he had another senior ranger come in and join the office. He informed her that she was going to be let go for going into a restricted area when snow was on the ground and to follow the other ranger. Meanwhile, he calls Tim into his office and does the same thing, asking him to write his report in front of him. Tim, being with the rangers, asks him what he would like it to say. Thus, this is how this report came to be. Another report came in September 2008 while picking up trash cans and putting new liners in the bear drums for trash. A young man, name unknown, said he was picking up the last barrel and felt like he was being watched. So, as he turns and starts to scan the woods behind him, thinking it may be a bear and could not see anything, he turns back to his work. Hears some twigs break, and he turns as fast as he could, and still nothing. As he stays still watching the woods, now he sees a head rise above a downed log. He notes that it had a heavy brow with very shaggy hair and starts to raise itself from behind the log. He notes how thick-bodied it is, how much hair is on its body. Its lips are heavy, and its nose is flattened on its face, and it's holding what appeared to be a spear. Him being alone when he stepped over the log, jumped back into his truck and head for the ranger station. He does not slow down until he gets there. Fast forward to a more recent time, August 18th, 2015. The campground just outside of Cadiz Cove was at peak capacity, and the on-site ranger was getting nightly reports from campers that something was prowling around in the early morning hours, from like 1:30 till 4. And after people started to turn on lights, that it would leave the area. So after 3 nights of this, Rex had his fill and asked his wife to check people in and out so he could stay up at night and catch whatever this was. Rex is drinking coffee, getting ready to start walking around the campground, so he checks his sidearm, his shotgun, and heads out the door. Turns on his flashlight and starts down the first row of campers and tents. Looks at his watch. It is now 1:35. He moves on to the next row, moving as quiet as he can on a gravel road bed, only using his flashlight as needed. When he completes the second row, he thinks these people just may be pulling his leg. He looks once again at his watch. It's now 2:05. Well, ain't this fine? A fine thing to got himself into, but then from somewhere toward the back, one of the dogs starts to growl. There's no barking, just serious growling going on. He abandons going row by row and now heads toward the growling dog, and slowly comes to the last couple of pull trailers and can tell the dogs at either the third from the end or second. These are the 2 that had made the report and had said that they were going into town for the night. He did not know they had left their dogs. So as he started his walk up the final row of campers, other than some spots that were for tents only, they were full as well. Something snapped and the dog was shut up at once. He stopped in his tracks, looking everywhere to make sure a bear was not sneaking up on him. He stood there for a while. There was no noise from anywhere, so he glanced at his watch. 2:42. Still no noise, so he did a 360-degree turn very slowly and took everything in. He started his movement forward again to reach the edge of the third trailer. He stood and listened, but he couldn't hear anything. He moved his shotgun to his shoulder, ready to fire. As he rounded the corner, he saw the dog on the ground about 10 feet from the front of the trailer. He shined his light to see nothing but the dog between the trailers, As he walked up to the dog, he bent down on one knee to feel the dog was still warm. Its neck was broke, still going over the dog for other wounds, because a bear would have killed it with its paw or a bite to its neck, and there was neither. About this time, he got a cold chill, and he starts to stand up. He raised his head to see 5 figures standing in front of him. The nearest one had to be 4 to 5 feet in front of him. The rest maybe 8 to 12 feet. He stared hard at what he was seeing. He stated if you had ever seen a picture of a caveman, then you knew what he was up against that night. He spoke softly. His head was down for almost 5 minutes, he'd guess, not knowing what to expect and from which one the attack would come, but it never did. When he raised his head, they were all gone. He hurried back to his camper, woke up his wife, radioed the supervisor on duty, told him that he quit, and if he wanted his stuff, he better be there by the time he got everything ready to go. And they were going back to the city. He showed up, tried to talk him out of it, but there was none of it. And now that brings us to the final one I will share. There had been about a dozen more, all similar. April 2019, getting the park ready for opening one morning, Ranger Carl Simmons had just opened the gate and asked the people at the gate to give him 15-minute head start before heading into the park. So as he comes to the first church on the left, he notices something out of order. So he jumps out of the truck to see what the problem was. He heads back to his truck when something was either thrown or someone hit him in the back of the head and knocks him out cold. When the cars start coming around, the first car does not stop to help, but the second van does. He's bleeding bad from the wound. They get on his radio and call for help. After 34 minutes or so, a few rangers show up, and the people in the van tried to tell them about the people that look like prehistoric people, but they were forced to move along. Now to the hunt. It happened in June of 2020. Most of my guys right now were recruits, as I had lost many in different ways. We land in a pasture, and the first thing I find is that they have campers in the campground, so I get in touch with the groundkeeper, give him 24 hours to get everyone out. Boy was mad and wanted to know who I thought I was coming in and giving orders like that, and that he only answered to the governor's office. All I said was, you better see how that works out for you. We set up our tents, myself, 2 men that had almost 50 years between them, and 6 raw recruits. They are combat hardened, so I am not worried about their performance with what we were up against. As we cleared the campground, I sent the 2 older members of the party to do a 1-mile sweep and to be back by dark. The rest of the men I told to watch the exiting campers and make sure no one took off on foot. And then I placed one in charge of the meal at 1900 hours, and I would take first watch myself. If any problems arose to get me, I'd be in the tent. I was going to lie down and rest till afternoon. Thinking there had been one sitting in the field. We were sleeping in the first night, and 2 more in the next mile or so. I hoped for a good report from my men in the field. 1600 hours, and I am up checking on progress from Campground. They still have 33 to get out before morning. They said they had some empty. They were trying to get in touch with the owner. I told him we would be there at 1000 hours to burn what was left on the ground. My final say on the matter, I left knowing that they would be gone and we could carry on with our hunt. My 2 senior officers reported back just after dark, right before our meal. Both report they had found no tracks or signs of any kind of heavy, upright walking creature. I assigned 3 men to each senior officer, and I said I would take the lead as we advanced, and that I would want 3 or 4 on the left and 4 on the right. Darkness sets in. We ate. Everyone is out like lights. Here comes my replacement, so I can lay back down and really try to sleep. And I do, but I'm up early to get ready for a short day and engage the men and let them know my plans and slow movement that I think will be the best approach for this operation, and that we will be here till we get results. I send 2 men to check the campground. They return and tell me 1 camper remains. I ask if it's on fire, and they say no. I say, why not? No reply. I guess I'll have to do it myself, I state, and head that way. When I got back over there were 2 men putting axles on the trailer so they could be pulling it. I asked who owned the trailer. He introduced himself and said he pulled trailers all night, making sure his would be the last one, and if I gave him an hour, it'd be gone. I told him from a military standpoint that this is the reason, and he said he understood. He had served 22 years in the Army, so I told him to leave it. Go into town till you get a call. All clear. Come back, but not before. They jump in his truck and head out. I head back to the men. Everything's packed, ready to go. I told them the formation I wanted everyone with spacing on each side about 5 yards. As we come to each location where there had been a sighting, we go into the area, search the area very well. After searching each area along the way, we find no signs of prehistoric cavemen. In these areas, the raw recruits could see on their faces that something was not sitting well with them. So I stopped them just after the 6th search we did. I asked them to tell me what's wrong. 4 of them stepped up to speak to me, and I told them to go ahead with your questions, as this is how you learn. One of the recruits stepped in front of the others and said I had an open door policy, and all had same concerns. He would be speaking for the 4. I said, go ahead. He then addresses me and says, we think that checking all of these sites where there had been previous sightings is a waste of time. We need to focus more on just looking to spot them. We moved maybe 4 or 5 miles tops, and we could have covered a lot more ground if we were not doing these searches. Okay, how many feel this way? He speaks for all. They raised their hands. 3 hands went up. It seems 1 had a change of heart. So I asked the one to explain why we did the unnecessary searches. His response was spot on. Locating them and how bare feet. Everyone understand now? 1 more question he asked. How will we know? We follow the tracks till they end. Any more questions? Then let's get back to work and do our job. We start moving again. We come to a spot where the 1968 event took place. And it's a huge field with a cabin tucked in the very back corner. We stopped on the road, and I ordered the 3 to set up everyone's tent and prepare a meal for everyone while the rest of us searched the field's edge and around the cabin in the back. And it wasn't long before one of the recruits sounds out that he has footprints at the edge of the woods. I make my way over because they have not been through our tracking program and cannot tell them how fresh they are. When I see the tracks on the ground and get excited, they were fresh, maybe 6 hours at the most. I order everyone back to camp, and we update everyone in the find. I then get with my 2 senior officers and start to formulate our plan of action. After our meal, the senior officers go over the plan for the following day with each recruit. We also post 3 men at a time to cover our camp after we bed down. Then before dark, we have everyone tear down their own weapons, make sure they are functional, and everyone is now locked and loaded. I take the last watch with 2 recruits, post them along a paved road, about 75 yards apart. I take the backside of the camp in the field about 35 yards behind the tent. What a beautiful night. No lights anywhere. The stars seem to be dancing in the sky. Nothing happens on anyone's watch, so we are up at sunlight. As camp is being broke down this morning, the birds are not singing. There is no movement from anywhere. With camp and breakfast done, we have eaten, we load our packs, we start to move out. Travis heads out to follow the tracks, and we are going to flank them on the road so we have communication with them through handheld device. We finally lose sight of them, but it's not long before we see them angling back toward the road, and then he keys the radio, which means he has movement, but not confirmed what it is. We're stopped and finally hear a click that gives me the all clear to move forward. and we all move about a half a mile and meet back up with Travis's group. We stop, discuss what he saw. He reports that he saw nothing, but one of the recruits saw movement between them and us, but nothing had come out. So, myself, Travis, and one more of the recruits double back, check the area again to see if they may have squatted down like deer sometimes do, or if it was something else. We spent about 2 hours doubling back, then made a line and tried to drive whatever it was out into the remainder of the group. Nothing ever came out, but I felt good that we were on the right track now. We all back together now and start down the road again as the path had come back out to the road. We're going down the steepest portion of the road before you get to the midway village. The hair on my arms and neck stand up. There in the road ahead of us, walking, are 7 to 9 beings that look like they're carrying spears. They have something across their shoulder. As we walk, we still have our packs on, and the back one in the group keeps looking back, but we keep hitting ditches and hiding. When we reach the rest center, I order everyone to lose their packs so we can travel faster and easier. After this, we follow them into the Great Smoky National Park and the southernmost boundary of Cadiz Cove. We are no longer in Cadiz Cove now. We follow them another 2 miles when we lose sight of them, and there's a clearing within a couple of 100 yards, and we group back up there. Finally, Steve finds a wide entrance to a cave. We see smoke coming up out of the ground on the top of the hill. We make our way over to the cave entrance. Myself on one side, Steve on the other. Travis has positioned all the recruits in a semicircle around the front of the cave. Myself and Steve are going in and trying to get a head count and also draw them outside the cave. So this is one big cave. I guess it went back 60 yards or so, and at the back they had a huge fire burning, torches leading the way. I got my head count and had a total of 16. There were 10 men, 6 women, as best as I could tell. Steve had the same count. In the formation, being rock inside, we both jumped from our hiding spot, got their attention, and they started cooing and grunting, grabbing their spears and bows and arrows looking device. And out we both went, took our positions and waited, and before long, here came 9 men. When they get outside, they were in like a bowling pin formation, missing the 7 and 10 pin. I had screamed for them to stop, and they did, but they did not understand a word I had said. Then they start doing this chant and moving toward one of the men. I order single shot only, as we need to capture as many as possible. I told them not to shoot unless they were getting close with the bow and arrow type device, but they could throw the spears further than I thought they could have. Now we're under attack, so I took first shot. Hitting one in the upper leg, they all jumped, but he did not go down. About the same time, one of the recruits was hit in the left shoulder, and they were still moving forward, so after all of us sending rounds over their heads and then ducking their heads, some men were ready to back up. I gave the order to shoot at will. After about 1 or 2 minutes, I called cease fire. They were all dead on the ground and had crawled back into the cave where the others were waiting. So myself and Steve head inside with sidearms only, plus 5 of the recruits. I was leading the way. Had to finish off 2 that were damaged with far more shots than a normal human could have taken. We plan on putting them in zip ties and flying them back to Virginia. We had counted 8 dead or down, and we needed to locate the other one that came out to fight. We were looking for a place he could hide as a place to escape, but the others were here. We split our paths, with Steve going right, myself going left. As we separated, I heard a human grunt and turned to see Steve standing with a spear sticking out of his stomach. I yelled and spotted another one with another spear in his hands when one of the recruits starts shooting him and walking toward him till he fell down, being shot so many times. He reloads. One of the other recruits checks on Steve. Now I'm over an old man in the cave as the recruits wage war with female-type cave people. I have him rolled over and have the cuffs on him when 2 of the females launch an attack on me. I throw one to the left off of me, and then out of nowhere a stone-like knife is buried into my upper chest. Travis and the rest of the recruits are in the fight, and now we are finally ahead in this fight. Travis comes in and orders everyone killed that's not already in cuffs, which comes to one old man, a young boy, and 2 women. They get Steve out first and work on his wound, and then I tell them to patch up the recruit and then help me. And I send one man back to get as many packs as he can, plus the radio. Next, I have the rest start to get all the dead bodies out of place so they will be easy to access. I'm lying next to Steve, and I ask how he is, and he says, "We're getting too old for this." I agree and start looking at one of the dead specimens lying close to me. Get 2 recruits to measure his height. He's the largest of all of them. He's 5 feet 9 inches tall and has to be 2 to 3 inches taller than the others, I'm guessing, at his weight, but I believe he would have tipped at 225. Where to start, his feet are like ours, only slightly bigger and much rougher. His calves are short, but they are all muscle. His upper legs look like he has been pushing weights for years. His torso was thick, stocky, and covered with hair like the rest of his body. He has wide, strong shoulders, and his arms are abnormally long, with giant hands, and are almost twice the size of a normal man's. His head is larger than that of a human. His hair long, matted, and has a pungent odor. His chin is straight and squared. His teeth are big and squared and dirty as all get out. His nose is flattened and pushed back on his face, and he has these coolest green eyes I'd ever seen on a creature. About the time a recruit arrives back with the radio and 3 packs, I get on the radio to get us a pickup. I sent 3 other recruits back to get the rest of the packs. I asked for 3 helicopters to come get us, and also requested 32 additional men from the academy to help load the bodies. Just over 2 hours, and here they are. They loaded the first chopper with the wounded and the living, along with hostages, and headed to Virginia. They then dropped off the cadets with 1 officer and loaded the bodies into the cargo net, pulled them into the helicopter bay, and then they were picked up, the cadets, and both back to Virginia. As of today, they still have 3 specimens alive, as the old man had died. They estimated his age to be 109 years old, and they continued to study them at our underground facility. So after going through all of my emails and kind of written, jotted notes of conversations that Victor and I had had, and all the hunts, this one has got to be, I don't know why, but it is one of my favorites. You'd think a Dogman or a werewolf would be, maybe even Bigfoot, but feral people. I think the reason why is because it kind of shines a light on that little boy Dennis Martin when he disappeared back in June 14th, I think, what was it, 1969? And in front of his family, like feet away from his family. And I believe that another family had witnessed a large creature with a red sack walking through the woods. Ironically enough, Dennis Martin was wearing a red sweatshirt. I really honestly believe that Dennis Martin was probably savagely attacked and devoured by these feral human that live in the Great Smokies. I don't think it was just one family or what. It wasn't like the mad family in Scotland that lived and cannibalized people. These were feral people, people that had no knowledge of the outside world. Anyway, yeah, it's just, this is my favorite, one of my favorite haunts. It's got to be my favorite haunt, actually. And I'm going to leave the audiobook alone for now. But I'm happy with how it turned out. And I'll let everyone know when it's up. I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet, or how I'm going to do it. So with that, my friends, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for all your support. Have a blessed and safe Memorial Day weekend. And, well, enjoy the uploads to come.